welcome back to another episode of Conversations, the show where we have conversations that maybe if more people had more of them, we would have a little more, say, belonging with other people. Hint, hint for our topic for today. So today we have maybe more of a sciencey episode than we usually do because we're going to be talking about belonging again, but we're not just going to be talking about the feeling of belonging. We're going to be talking about some of the science behind belonging and specifically what is happening in our brains on belonging. So when we're in belonging versus when we are not in belonging. And who else would I have having a conversation with me about belonging except the lovely Paul, who has got his Star Trek shirt on, and I always love that one. Paul, always glad to see you here. And for those of you who are new to the show, or for those of you who just need a reminder, this is a conversation for all of us. So if you are joining us live, please let us know that you are here in the comments, and we would love to hear your thoughts, experiences, expertise, if you have it in the arena as well, to add to the conversation. Every new perspective adds a new dimension to the conversation, and we welcome all new dimensions to this conversation today. So before we get too far into the science, Paul, for those of our viewers who don't know you, who are you and why is belonging so important to you?
Oof. Well, technically, I'm kind of a belonging nerd. I'm fascinated with it, and I'm always it lights me up. And somebody made a comment about lighting up your neural circuits earlier. I can't find the space on the computer screen right now, but I get lit up when I see people belong and how that takes them to a completely higher level of performance and being in that space. And for me, it's so cool to watch that happen, and then to understand it and go, oh, this is what's going on the inside that makes this the way we are at our best on the outside. And so that part of it, I just love. So in a way, I'm a belonging coach. So I help people and teams belong and really just get to a place where they love who they're with and love what they're doing together.
And this is why I have you as my co-host on belonging shows. And I think actually Mark is sharing an interesting comment even to start us off. I'm not sure I'm even an expert in my own self. And fun fact, hey Mark, I think a lot of people would agree with you on their own relationship with themselves. And one of the things we're going to be exploring as part of this belonging conversation today is self-belonging as well as group belonging. So these are the things that can help us become an expert in our own selves. So you are in the right place, my friend. Okay, so Paul, we've talked a lot. For those of you who are a fan of the show, you've seen Paul's face before. We talk a lot about belonging because it's one of those things that's really a critical human piece of just a little critical to reaching our own individual potential, to reaching group potential, and all of these different things. And so we've talked a lot about the experience of belonging and some of the actions that we can take to get into belonging in some of the other episodes. And today we're going to focus on the science I guess what's happening in the brain, the science and what's happening into the brain that actually, what happens in belonging versus what happens out of belonging. So, Paul, do you want to start with our little demonstration?
Or do we want to? Let's give a frame first.
Okay.
So the most common definition or institutional understanding of belonging. Hey, Samina. And by the way, Mark, I hope we dive exactly to where your question talks about there, because I think that's where we're going to land in a few minutes. The thing that we're always given is if you have a sense of acceptance, a sense of authenticity, a sense of identity, and a sense of inclusion, then you belong. I'm going to ask you to believe something a little bit different, at least for this time that we're hanging out together in this live cast, which is that's not belonging. That is huge affirmation, and it's really important for us to actually get that also in our relationships. But it's more that's more the affirmation side of our being. And I'm going to give you this aspect for belonging, which is it's the place where you feel you own and you care for somebody in their successes, dreams, and failures. And not a so that, but it's an and, meaning it's a bidirectional kind of reciprocal space. They feel, own, and care for you in your successes, dreams, and failures. And because it's in that state that our brain changes. Our brain says yes to the set of affirmations, and we feel good. I mean, who doesn't like a hug? I mean, flat out. But that's not the same as you actually having that feel, own, care for somebody else. And that's where I've set the definition so that you land in your power for belonging, as opposed to being only subject to belonging if somebody gives you those 4 things. And so that's where I'm going to throw the little shift in. So given that, there's a thing that happens when we're in these types of web meetings. Like right now, Tracy and I are in a web meeting. And boy, I wish we could Zoom this one away and bring a whole bunch of you in this and have this be this big, massive thing, because there's a way to do it that actually sets us up for belonging. So I can see Tracy, she can see me. And we've set up our stuff so that we can actually look at just each other's faces and be in presence. And there's a thing that happens. And what we end up getting, and Tracy, if you want to put the ticker on, is we get a team OS. When we're in feel, own, care for each other, and that means successes, dreams, and failures. That means we're in it with each other. We choose each other at this level. We get what's called a team OS, and the team O in OS is oxytocin. And these are the things you actually get from a sustained state and replenishing of oxytocin. And if you think about it, you want a manager, or you want to be maybe even more empathetic to your employees, and you're having a tough time being empathetic. You might be setting things up in a way that it's actually working against your empathy. Cooperation, generosity, interpersonal, trust, social motivation, especially if we talk in the term psychosocial, pro-social motivation, the altruism, emotional recognition. This is all the stuff that when you're in belonging gets an uptick in you. And your neural capacity, your attributes for these things to come into play actually pop in. And so they go up in belonging. Let's go to the serotonin one. The serotonin one also gives you, it's more than, you get it just keeps me level, keeps me sane. These are the actual things that come in with serotonin and the second part of the team OS, which is you actually have a faster learning rate. You repeat fewer errors. And it's funny that this is part of the research of digging into what does serotonin actually give us if we have a sustained state of serotonin production. Repeating fewer errors, that's like, well, I hate making errors just flat out, but to repeat that and get that into play is a marvelous thing, because you will do the most, because we're humans. We're all going to make errors, aka the belonging definition that I asked earlier. Feel, own, care in successes, dreams, and failures. Think of failures as errors. They're just errors, and we're human, and we're going to do that. But what you end up also getting is a calmness about maybe those errors, increased adaptability, so you can make adjustments in that space. The clear decision formation is really an interesting thing that came up in the research of when we get serotonin bursts into play, which is instead of going, oh, if I do this, I have this problem. If I do this, I have this problem. You end up going, I'm cool. I can handle either of these decisions, which way they go. And your clear decisions happen in a much more calm state that leaves you in a much more highly adaptable place even after that. So it's really cool how it actually works. And then more importantly, at the very end of it, when you're under all that duress or stress, you end up with higher recall in that higher cognitive demand. And so the team OS is what you get when, like how we're sitting here with each other. Believe it or not, we're not staring at the camera. So we're not getting distracted by that. And we're not having to flip back and forth. We're just looking at each other. And so, but what happens in a meeting when we're not doing this, and we're going to demonstrate that really quick. So at this moment, It looks like we're actually facing away from each other. And the truth is, we're looking right at each other, but we've got our cameras set off to the side. In my case, it's off to this side. In her case, it's the other side. And what this does is it makes us keep going, what's over there? You want to have some fun, go to a shopping center or someplace in a public space and just look up and hold your head up and watch the mirror neurons kick in for, I wonder what's up there. And it'll be this wondering look. If you look up with a fear face, people will look up and go, oh, what should I fear above me? If it's a smiling awe and face in awe, people will look up and they'll get the awe face. But what ends up happening in a web meeting is, and for me, it'd be, what's over my left shoulder? I realize the outlet over there is a fantastic thing to look at, Tracy, but aren't we in this meeting together?
This is so weird.
Right. So, okay, how about we bring this back?
I'm looking at myself and being like, what am I looking at? Right? Like my brain is looking at you, but then another part of my brain is saying like, but I'm not. I can see myself not looking.
Okay. So this is okay. I'm going to move it back because I'm about to lose my mind. Okay. I'm back to here on this. All right. So what's great about what Tracy just brought up in this space, and this is where it starts getting in the way of generating our team OS, is why did I just see, like, because we're using StreamYard, we're going to see each other in the screen, which means our visual cortex is back to more of the sciencey stuff. Our visual cortex it's this back part of the brain. Oh gosh, I need more hair. It's the back part of the brain, the gray part. Oh yeah, thank you. Gray matter, the back part of it, half your brain, the cerebral cortex space, is your visual cortex. And it has two primary functions. What you're focused on, in my case here, is this wonderful human across from me, Tracy, and movement. And in that aspect of movement always wins. This is why when we see ourselves in a web meeting, unless we can turn ourselves off in the space, what we end up doing is going, and that movement takes us out of a space where we're in real time belonging. And this is the goofy thing when we think about this, because Tracy and I are like, I don't know, thousands of miles apart.
We're in different countries. So
we're in different countries. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. Perfect. But what ends up happening when we get things right, we can have all the behavioral things for belonging. Like I appreciate Tracy. I feel, own, and care for Tracy in her successes, dreams, and failures. And that allows for her to receive that aspect from me in this space. But the visual part that's happening also is me moving, which draws me aside a little bit. And that's actually interrupting the ability to be in a state of belonging, be in a state of relationship where the only thing that's happening is the feel, own, care. Special forces will train in a space of caring for each other in such deepness that even with bullets and everything else going around and people trying to kill them, they can stay in this state. And it's a practice state. But what ends up happening when we can stay in this place, and I'm really fighting the fact that I can see myself moving in the screen, but what ends up happening is at 11 million bits a second, she and I are exchanging a mirrored response to each other. We're generating, because of the relationship and the belonging that we share, a replenishing and a sustained state of oxytocin and serotonin. And we get to have that if we set things up this way. And now the fact that we can actually smile and let the other person know, yeah, we're here. I'm with you. And it's this dynamic. It's not this singular quid pro quo. I got this from Tracy and now far I belong. It's this constant state that we get into a place of. And then that gets put into our brains to be later drawn upon in an anchoring reflection. And so to get to the point, this is what we get when our brain is in belonging. And it's different than the old thing of there used to be the old ad, this is your brain on drugs, and it was a fried egg. Well, this is the
that was what drove me to name this episode the way I did. Correct?
So that's the part where if we have this aspect of belonging, of the real space between us. Oh my gosh, she's, by the way, she has a cool droid. That is the droid I'm looking
both
for.
Nerds.
Yeah, we are both
Just
nerds.
in case anyone was wondering.
But that is the place where we get our Team OS. We're generating that right now. And everybody has the ability, if they create a belonging space, to naturally create an uptick in their oxytocin and serotonin. Now, dopamine is also involved, but I'm only concerned right now with just the fact that we get the oxytocin and serotonin, because you'll get dopamine even when a meeting is frustrating and whatever else. But your brain does this whole shift. And where I want to take that is once our brain gets that shift, we tell a different story. I mean, think about, you want to put those the aspects up on the screen again there?
Oh, yes. But first I have to put
Nerdalicious. I like that.
Very good. You want oxytocin or serotonin?
Yeah, let's do oxytocin.
Okay.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, I mean, I want you to think about this now in the movement from belonging, like Tracy and I belonging with each other, to self-belonging. See, I get signals from Tracy about me. Well, it's actually about her and her response to me and her interactions. That gets me into a different story phase. Now, if I'm out of oxytocin, I'm just in a cortisol, and maybe I'm in an endorphin state, I may end up going towards a defensive place, or I'm in not enough space. But now, because we've been in a good space of belonging, I have a whole different place to go in self-belonging. Matter of fact, I have a bank, you could say, of oxytocin attribute upticks. And now, instead, when I write my story, instead of writing a story of, well, that sucked and maybe I'm not good enough, now I can write a story where I have more empathy for, yeah, I just tried to do something over a technology stack that was not going to support what I was going to do. Now, all of a sudden, I have an empathy for myself, and I start changing the story. Maybe I can be more generous, and now I can even give myself a self-interpersonal trust aspect. I can step outside myself and go into an altruistic space. And so now, and let's go even farther and say emotional recognition, where we actually start seeing each other in a self-belonging space. I can translate feel, own, care for myself in my successes, dreams, and failures. That's my filter. My belonging filter is that. I have to feel, I have to own, I have to care for myself. I now can emotionally recognize, yeah, my optimal was not as high as my optimal in this state. And the reason I'm using that versus highest or higher, whatever, is everybody's optimal could be like, just getting up in the morning might be the best optimal there ever was. And from the day before, maybe it is. But to recognize that, to have your oxytocin and your serotonin in a good enough state allows you to go to that place. Now your self-belonging can write a whole different story. And right, let's throw up serotonin again for people. By the way, this was on the fly, us even just figuring this stuff out. So give you an idea.
Paul actually has this really awesome image, and if you message him, he'll send it to you.
Yeah.
But like, we couldn't make it work on StreamYard.
We were trying, and it was right beforehand. But that this is what happens here. Instead of, well, actually, what a great position here. It could have been me going, and Tracy going, well, I can't do this way. Instead, we in a good state of belonging, and I will say this, and I'm very confident in this, she found herself in a place to innovate using the tech stack that was where we're sitting here on, and to find a way to actually bring this information. And I actually think it turned out all right to where,
not the worst.
Yeah, it's not the right. To actually get this. So here we are in a place where now I'm under load and I can tell myself a different story, one that actually feels, owns, and cares for myself during higher recall during a high cognitive load. I mean, if you really see, I guess where I want to get to with this gives you the space to borrow from your belonging, bring it into your self-belonging, and you'll come in with a more optimal state to create your story. And that part is where I want to drop it back to you, Tracy, because we're always writing our story, and you either let somebody else write it, and it's not yours. We had this conversation.
Yeah, but stay tuned for a future post from Tracy on that.
But so Tracy does stuff with people's personal brand, helps them out, helps them guide them to be themselves instead of having somebody else write their brand for them, which means there's a walking and a belonging that comes in that space. And this is probably why we ended up connecting and like going, yes, it's Tracy. So, but think about the difference that you get in your belonging about yourself when you're in belonging. Now, and I'm going to
I would love to explore this more, Paul, because I feel like at some point, every time we come back to this, and I think it's important to keep coming back to, is this like chicken and the egg with belonging, right? What comes first? Self-belonging, group belonging? What are your thoughts on, can you go out and belong with other people if you don't belong with yourself? And if you can't, then how do you take advantage of the team OS in terms of creating your own belonging?
Well, so case in point, the UN classifies solitary confinement, the real solitary confinement, as anything over 15 days is torture. And after 15 days, it's easy to get the beginnings of permanent neurological damage. In other words, being completely marginalized, completely put out of belonging, which is what that is. Now, think about it. You're completely safe. You're not going to die. You're getting food. You're getting whatever else. But your brain says, oh, this is bad. And it creates a whole different story. So to that point, we need belonging from somebody else. I mean, we're designed for the way that we're looking at each other right now. And to this case, also the people here hanging out with us. When earlier we're looking in different directions, that's how we're designed not to be. We're designed to be face to face, seeing each other. And there's this beautiful thing that comes with that. That says, I see you, you're mine. You say back to me, I'm yours. And then on top of that, I have your back covered. You have my back covered. Now, all this is to say is there is a paradox, a belonging paradox, which is you can't belong with others unless you self-belong. And because otherwise you're just fitting in. If you are deferring yourself the whole time, every bit of the time, you're just fitting in. But let's go to authenticity. But I'm being my authentic self. Well, if your authentic self is a caustic, abusive space for somebody else, it's going to be tough to create belonging out of that because it doesn't work. And so there's a belonging space in your authenticity which actually, if we go back to those first four things, you felt a sense of inclusion, acceptance, and everything else. What's really interesting there is, like, actually, this would be the perfect example. Let's say, so I'm sitting here and I'm being a jerk on Tracy's show. I hope I would never do that.
I hope
yeah.
Just so you know, everyone, you get invited on this show because I believe strongly you're not going to do that.
That's definitely in fact. But if I'm doing, and so she's going to go, I don't care if you're being your authentic self. And this is why I'll say this, that definition of belonging, and I will come back to the answer. I will come back, I promise. Is no, she's not going to let me be my authentic self. If my authentic self is being a jerk on this space to belong with her here. She is not going to accept me being that way. As a matter of fact, and she's going to probably tell me, hey, cut that out, or else, yeah, you ain't ever coming back here.
Probably just put you in the green room.
It is uninclusion. and then the last thing, from a standpoint of getting to have an identity with her, she will disown my being an identity with her. So, but here's the interesting thing about that. So all four of those things I will not get based upon me being a certain way authentically, but she'll actually cast me aside. And there's a reason for that thing. But she says, hey, could we not do that? Would you please come back into the game with me? The act of belonging was actually the calling of me back in, and not affirming those four spaces. But what it is she has a feel, she has an own, and she has a care for me in my successive dreams. And in that case, it would be 4 points of good failure, for me to still belong. Now, my choice would be to come into that agreement, back in with her, into that space, and to be in the ways that we've kind of naturally, because we've never codified, I belong with you because of this, and you belong because ours is an unspoken codified space. But we now belong. And she could call me back, and it would be the opposite of those four things to be in belonging. So, and that's why I asked, try this definition of belonging: to feel, own, care for them and successes, dreams, and failures, and they, you. If it's one way, back to the discussion, otherwise it's not belonging, because now it's just compliance or fitting in. So we're born, and I'm pretty sure Tracy can confirm this.
I was
Tracy,
born. Yes.
And I'm totally blanking on your kid's name. I'm embarrassed because, I mean, how long have we been hanging out? Nicholas, I'm sorry. And my nephew, Nick, who I love. Oh, punch me in the face.
Luckily, this isn't part of our belonging agreement, so it's fine.
Oh, God, it's embarrassing. So when Nicholas was an infant, if you handed Nicholas off, Nicholas would be like, hey, wait, you're not my mom. Mm-hmm. So we have an innate ability for belonging. It's built into our neural wiring. What we don't have is the ability on the onset, as in our full identity, and to use the language, in that beginning of our personal brand, let's say. And I'm going to use that language because Tracy is someone who guides people in their personal brand. But when we don't have our own base of self-belonging, how do you get it? Well, you get that from the way you're raised. Your family gives this, and it is a belonging that's based upon everything you're getting and getting and getting. But there's a point where you internalize it, and instead of it being a from, it's an interactive space where it's interdependent, our belonging. And that's where your self-belonging, you become you. And if you have middle school aged kids, you're going, God, that's like the worst time of your life to raise a child. Maybe, and some say it's a tough time even to go through school, but that space exactly is part of that self-belonging development. And then we move into the space where, yeah, I can, and this was going towards what Mark was talking about earlier. I can self-belong because I have had a bank of belonging that I've grown up with. And if you hadn't had it, then you have to go through the effort to go and develop and find that again, or get it anew. But in it, we ebb and flow. There are times where, yeah, I'm way more than enough, and look out, world. And then there's times where, oh shit, I'm empty. And in it, oops, I'm not supposed to swear. And so in that space, now we do need that belonging. And so this is always going like this, just like, and I will say just like, when we're in the state of belonging, real relational belonging, not the sense of, and I'm going to say it for anybody out there who's listening, would you work for a sense of a paycheck? If that's the case, why would you accept a sense of belonging? The answer, I'm assuming, is no. I would not work for a sense of a paycheck. But that space is always an ebb and flow, just like when we're in belonging, and it's storing and giving us a bank to draw upon. Even like if we were to talk about baseball, or actually, Tracy, you were a basketball player.
Basketball. Yep.
So
I also play baseball though too, so it depends.
Okay. So the baseball one I like is from the standpoint of a pitcher. A pitcher's going to go out there, and then the pitcher's going to run out of gas. A pitcher does not want to get pulled off the mound. Matter of fact, they want to fight for their team because they're not in. It's not a fight flight. I'm going to get yanked off the mound. That is not what they're worried about. I know pitchers and that have played semi-pro and pro, and no, it is not. It is they don't want to leave because they want to deliver for their team. They're not worried about if they're in belonging. They do not worry about getting sent down to the minors or anything like that. But they will have to be pulled off the mound because their bank, it is really empty. Or sometimes we just get hurt, and we have hurt that happens in our lives. And at that point, we also, again, we need to replenish that state. Belonging is a place that actually replenishes it instead of filling a vacant gap that still leaves us wondering and wanting. And so that's where I'd go with that. So it is a paradox, but ultimately we have to get it first. And if I were to talk from the work organizational standpoint, this is why it's so important for senior leadership, because they're the ones in the authority space, and we'll call it the power differential, to actually create and put the give place of belonging. Not because somebody has to, if they're in just a pure receive mode, like those 4 things, that's just receive mode. The give part is the modeling space where then somebody else I'm going to give. I'm going to choose to belong. I'm going to give, feel, own, and care. Because you could get everything, but if you don't feel, I'm not going to go fight for these people. You're not in belonging. You might be getting all 4 things, but you have to have that too. And that's your personal choice to do that. It's hard to do that when you're empty though. So there's the paradox again.
Yeah. Well, because that's what I'm thinking, right? If you are feeling empty and depleted, how easy is it to go and give something to someone else, right? Like that. I actually think it is actually pretty easy, but a lot of times our experience is that I have nothing to give, right? But this is also why, like, it's cool to look at, like, maybe less a paradox more than a balance, right? Not that it's like 100% balance, but that when we have the people looking at it from a team perspective that have that higher level of oxytocin and serotonin in their systems and they are available to giving it, then you can give it to the people who don't, and that can in turn trigger that. And then in the times when you are low, people can give it back. So it's not necessarily that you always have to be the giver, but when you are capable, you can be.
Well, actually, that's a really, that is such a good point. Aside from the moments and the times where we don't have it to give, if you're in a place and have created belonging for you, and I say it's important because everybody's like, you create belonging for others. No, you create belonging for you. It does create this self-regenerating space that comes into play. Like, for example, most people aren't aware of this. When you give something, whether it's gratitude, an expression of gratitude, an actual gift, whatever, your brain's response is, I think it's over twice the oxytocin production. And there's an interesting aspect too, but I won't go there. That's too much science at that point. Sorry. But there's then when you receive something from somebody, what's really interesting though, is in your self-reflection of that, you're more a little self-critical about what you give, and you're way less critical about what you receive. But the receiver gets far less oxytocin out of the deal. And that creates a regenerative space in your teams. And that's where, and then if you bring serotonin into that, where you're like, oh, this is daunting. You end up in a space of, well, let's do this. Let's go. Or like even us this morning. Well, we wanted to do a certain thing. We didn't get to show it the certain way that we wanted to, but we ended up going, all right, let's go. And we didn't go with, oh, what if it's not like what we want? We ended up in a different space, and that's a generative space. Mm-hmm. And if you think about how does a championship women's soccer team pull it together in the face of there's no chance we're going to win this. We're the underdogs, and they win. I can talk about this from the U.S. women's soccer team at one point when they won World Cup. They were able to. They fed each other in that space of belonging, these types of things. And look at now, instead of, I can't make that play, it's, oh, bring that play on. And as time's running out, the cognitive load is going higher because of urgency and time. They're still able to stay in the game. And literally the place that's generating that for them is their space of belonging, their relationship of belonging in the game. Mm-hmm. So
it's actually interesting for me to think about this because last summer I went to my high school basketball coach's celebration of life, and we won the city championships when I was in high school. And there was the only, I still call us girls because we were girls at the time. The only girls that were there were the ones from the championship team. And I thought that was like, oh, that's because we're like have a different relationship with him. But that's not true. We have a different relationship with each other, and we knew each other was going. So we wanted, yes, to celebrate our coach, but also to be in that belonging that we had when we were a championship team. And even though most of us hadn't seen each other for like 20 years, it was like, oh, hey, yeah, you're this. And like, it's like you had your spot on the floor, like you did when we were playing, and it didn't go away.
That is okay. Well, that is oh God. Paul Zach, he's a neuroscientist who talks about oxytocin, and he was in a discussion with Rich Divany, who was a Navy SEAL trainer officer. And when they were talking about, that was one of the things they talked about, which was you have this good memory and everything else. It's like, but that's not the oxytocin regen space. That's actually because of the oxytocin, it has given you an anchoring where you can actually frame that this is my place. I belong here. And wherever you go, those are my people. I will go there for them. I'm really kind of thinking about this in a, like towards the, sorry, this is a Paul tangent. Apologies, everybody. But relative to the aspect of psychological safety, you went through the effort to go to this place, and you found that the championship team went there. And it wasn't that the others were excluded. Others may be like, yeah, I don't know, whatever. I don't want to talk to, whatever. Maybe it's they did care because, like you, they had a great relationship with the coach. But they're like, oh, I don't want to impose. Maybe I've got family draws and everything else. So they're not doing it because they lack. And so this is where I'll take the shift. We never hear, yeah, I went and did that risky thing. I put myself out for somebody. Why'd you do that? Well, because I was psychologically safe. I'm sorry, it's not going to be heard. Now, the safety matters, but it's where does our human brain really create that safety? And where I'll say is that comes in the space of belonging. If we talk about the team going forward and challenge, it's go for the shot. Well, what if I miss the shot? No, you're not going to get punished for that. Okay.
This is like my exact experience with every single 3-pointer I shot.
Oh my gosh.
Because my coach would be like, no, yes.
Yeah. And so towards that space, if we were to take a Maslow's hierarchy, even like in back to the whether we're alone, how do we get self-belonging when we don't? It comes in our belonging relationship of tribe. And so now the true safety is being in the belonging embrace. And that's where I'm willing to go forward. I'm going to take the risk, and I may make the mistake. I may make the shot. I may not make the shot, but I'm willing to do that for my tribe. And I think that's the place where the true psychological safety shows up. Because now we're in unite and fight instead of either fight, flight, or the absence of fight, flight. And yes, for those out there, yes, there is fawn and freeze also included on the fight, flight side. But we're able to go into a higher place. And I love where you went earlier. That's also regenerative. Like,
I'm
how
just
much
thinking of this moment too, because this also plays into your ability to be like reveal pieces of yourself and to be in vulnerability, because so our warm-up song was Thunderstruck by AC/DC, and at the end which still to this day makes me want to run. Like when I hear it, I just like want to run fast. Not away from anything, just go. It makes me want to go fast. And at the end, so after the end of all of the all of the ceremony and everything, they had this like wrap up slideshow, and they used Thunderstruck as the like background music, and I just like I started bawling. I just was like, oh my god. And then I was like I looked around, and all of the other girls were also crying, and everyone else was like, it's like AC/DC's Thunderstruck, right? It's not like a touching momentum song, right? It's like
so you basically cried over Thunderstruck.
This
really
has meaning to me that it doesn't have to other people, but it has meaning to us, to all of us.
And that's another beautiful thing that happens. And this also, what I love is how this becomes part of your story, is part of this us story. But it is just as much uniquely just your story, because you were on that team by your choice, by their choice. And we can say you made the team, but we have all been on teams where we made the team, but we weren't on the team. You know, there was the ceremonial, yes, you get to be your authentic self, you get this, this, and this, but you didn't belong.
When I was in junior high, my coach told me that there were shooters and passers and rebounders, and my job was going to be a passer. Like that, because that's going to help me reach my potential. Yes. Okay.
Right. But to go where you went a minute ago, to actually, you're on the team, not just in the wins, but in the flubbed up passes, the flubbed up shots, the way that you would show up so that your other teammate had you as a bank to draw upon for them, just like they were a bank for draw upon for you. But what's I think what really matters in that space is it's not a fit in space. I mean, we know how culture fit was talked about forever. Are you the right fit? And it's like, I will always reframe that as, do I belong or not? Would I choose them as much as they would choose me? Not from a score tally, but will I see myself going into unite and fight? Because there are people that I will unite and fight for, and I've done it. It's a weird human thing we do, where they never will back because their life doesn't go that direction, and we're not in that space of belonging. But that doesn't mean because I'm willing to do that I belong in that space. That just means I'm willing to go to a space and give.
My family.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about my family. I love them. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, right. But think about the space of, I'll ask it this way. Was it an option for you not to go to that celebration?
Yes.
Okay.
Although I was asked to be a speaker, so. But
okay, no, I'd actually keep going with that. What was your compelling point that said, because there are other things you could have been doing, other whatever else.
Oh, and man, the room was so hot. It was like the middle of the summer and there was no air conditioning, and it was. kind of
but
physically
you still
there.
but you still chose them,
I did.
and you went.
And I would do it again. Because the other option was hanging out at home with my family.
Oh,
I love my family, everyone. I love my family.
yeah.
But
No.
it's just different for me because this is the thing I think, even from like a personal branding perspective, people lose sight of, is that like, what are those choices that you make that you feel good about, that you would choose to do again? Who are the people? Like, I had Paul on this show multiple times for a reason, right? One, because we belong. Two, because he has all of the insight and we can never get to it in one show. But there's people you choose. There's a reason why all of you lovely folks are here in the chat today. You chose us today, and we are very excited that you would do that. And I think we just forget that, and if we don't know belonging from that two-way street, we forget that this is us deciding to make a choice. I still choose to be part of that championship basketball team. And did the entire team come? No, but I will tell you, it was really interesting. It was like an interesting study in belonging for me, because like the core team members, besides my best friend Krista, who lives in Switzerland, so international travel aside, the core of that basketball team was all there. All of us. And I didn't know all of them were coming. We all independently chose that we were going to be there that day. And then I was like, oh my gosh, my people. Because it would have been a heck of a lot scarier to say my emotional piece about my coach in front of a whole bunch of strangers. But even having like a room full of 100 people and 4 of them were my people. Okay, I can do this. I got this.
And oh God, I see. Oh, that was so cool. So back to your brain on belonging. When you spoke to them because you got a whole different space from it, which let you draw upon a whole different space that you may have held back. and this is where, and somebody wrote something about authentic in.
Oh yes, I want to get to Samina's question. Yeah.
So this is that wonderful spot where, in the space of belonging, you can say, I'll be my authentic self. Well, what is my authentic self? I can tell you with certain people, probably every third word might be a swear word just out of fun, jest, and laughter.
If we're not on live, yeah.
If we're not on live. But think of it. Am I being inauthentic because I'm not doing that now? No, I'm being authentic because this is my place and belonging. Am I doing it to fit in? No. If I was like, oh, if I say these things, I'll never be on her show again, I would be fitting in. If I do this because I love Tracy and this is her show and I want to be the best person possible for her show and her message out there, then I'm going to show up that way. And so to get to that thing, being authentic and returning a belonging behavior, it's this responsorial space where, no, because I'm feeling, owning, and caring for Tracy and her program in this space. And whether we end up having the technology that worked or it failed, and even if we could have done it a way, and maybe, because I'm gonna throw it like this: say there was a way, but Tracy failed to get it. And like, do I go, oh, you could have done it this way? Now she might go, and there might be, a middle finger might show.
If it's me, I would just be like, yeah, probably. Next time.
But because we're actually in a state of belonging, we're fine, and maybe we'll figure it out later. But what we're not going to do is punish each other in the process. And like I say, this is where, like, if I were talking to like a couple Navy SEAL buddies, the problem is never the mistake and the failure. The problem is not trying to find a way past it for each other in the future. And this is where performance level mastery gets its strongest driver for people. is we're willing to do this. Well, I'm going to go now back to the self-belonging state. If I can't be myself in a space, then I probably don't belong there, because I'm going to be holding back from myself in that space so that I don't lose my fit-in status.
Mhm.
And that's an incredibly messy human space. But for me to actually show up and choose me also in the equation of things, I've got to be willing to say, oh, I don't get to be me here. I guess I don't get to be here then.
I actually said that once. There was this Facebook group I was in, and the coach that ran it had posted the thing, and this one guy had posted a comment, and I posted a comment, and they were very similar. So then I got into like this conversation on his comment, and we had a great conversation. And I said, hey, if you'd like to talk about this more, we should have a like virtual chat sometime. And I got a private message from the coach who runs the community that's like, you can't have chats with people. And I was like, well, like I was having a chat with him in the chat. Right? So like that's okay, but I'm not allowed to have like a coffee chat. And he's like, yeah, because this is my community. These are like my prospects.
Oh.
And I was like, there is some belonging there. Well,
no, actually, there's such a good thing about clarifying the difference of the own component in feel, own, care. Because if it's own, I possess you and control you, that's not the own we're talking
and
about.
I didn't participate in the choice in that. Right? Like,
right.
I guess technically I joined your community, but anyway, the result was that like, okay, like this is how I would show up as a human, right? Like I'm not trying to snipe your clients. I don't even want that guy probably, right? Like I don't even know if he's a potential client for me. I just had an interesting conversation and would like to continue my conversation. That's how I show up as a person. So if that's offensive for you, then this is the wrong place for me. And I left the community.
Right.
And I felt really good about it.
What a great, easy, and actually this is a highly relatable story for people to get of self-belonging, where you can actually craft that healthy level of story. I mean, and it's hard because everything we're told, even from job descriptions and everything else, which is you either fit in here or you don't belong. You either run this way.
And that's actually, even when I hear you say that, that's like a choice from one side saying like, I won't choose you unless you do this, but I'm not going to care about whether or not you would naturally or authentically do that. I'm just going to say like, you must. And I think this ties into Sam's question as well, right? Because we're talking about like, how do we know? I've actually had this in a hiring scenario where I was interviewing this lady and I just like couldn't get her vibe, right? I was like, what are you all? I cannot tell what you were all about. I cannot tell if you're going to care about this job. I can't tell what you care about, right? Like her guard was up just like so hard. And we did end up hiring her, but after 3 interviews, not because there was normally 3 rounds of interviews that we would go through for candidates, because literally I said to my boss, like, I can't say yes or no to this person because I don't know enough about them, right? Yes, I have their resume. Yes, I can see what they can do, but I'm not getting an authentic response here, which means I don't have access to belong with this person. Right. Obviously I didn't have that language at the time, but that was very much a like feeling for me. So on that front, Paul, is to get back to Sam's question, when people are quote unquote returning the belonging behavior, is that like who decides? I mean, like I always think
perfect question. And neuroscience moment, going back. So there's intuition, and then there's the stuff we can articulate and know. The intuition, the stuff we can also know. And we'll be very, very acute. And that's because literally we're processing at 11 million bits a second in our brain. And by the way, that means how the shirt feels on your sleeve, the earphones on the side of your head, the temperature of the room. Your body is literally processing so much. and your brain's going, here's what I care about right now. And let's go back to the visual aspect. Once I saw my hand move as I just did this motion in front of the camera, I went, that just took 2 or 3 bits before I came back. But
it's a big problem for hand talkers.
It really, well, for web meetings where you can't do this. I do have a Zoom thing that allows you not to do that, but that's what we're on right now. Unless StreamYard would like to talk to me, I might give you an option. But
Paul has a solution for you, StreamYard, if you're listening.
No, we will pick up the cues in our intuition, even though we've been told over and over again, here's the 7 steps for this, here's the 12 things for that, here's the 3 things for this, and that's how you know this. We also do have this beautiful space here and this beautiful space here. And I'll leave it now. I will take it into the gut space, which now I'm off camera, where our brain and our whole neural system is interacting in a moment to figure out whether or not we belong with the person across. And I will clarify this. Feel, own, care for someone's successes, dreams, and failures. For you to have that also has different, you could say, depths or circles of that. So, for example, I have my spouse and my dogs. I have gone into harm's way for all of them without even a thought. It's in my system 1 Gator brain that just says instant read, go do now. Did I articulate any of that stuff? No. Did I know it? Yes. So our brains, even though so here's this person, you're like, but something also said, I want to see more. I'm not ruling them out, because otherwise you would have said, nope. No. But you stayed in that space, and eventually you got there. I mean, I once set up international HR, and people told me I was crazy, but I ended up going through. I planned on probably 3 to 4 interviews. I ended up doing 5, and the last one was taking this two candidates in front of the whole team in India, and really paying attention to the dynamic, and for what I saw would take the tribe to its more optimal unite and fight space together, where they would actually still in fun and still in the joy of life and work, but go, no, this is real. And I actually gave my decision of where I wanted to go with this with the tribe and said, here's why. And they went, okay, then let's go forward and do it. And to the thing is, I did not have this exact list of everything. I had to actually pay attention to this thing that happens to us across time and space, and in this case, the internet, for us to go, yeah, I can belong. And I'm going to throw that in one more thing there, because this came up even this morning in a group. We can have love at first sight. Belonging at first sight doesn't happen. Belonging happens over time, because we end up having to have this mirror neuron exchange, this neurochemical bidirectional space of build for each other, because that's part of how being human is. But your thing there was, you had to go through, you actually could know it, and your brain was going, whether you use the language or not, like I say, it's, do I belong with this person? Does this person belong with my tribe, my us story? Because we are, no matter what, even if we're completely individual in the moment that we're in focus, we're still part of an us story. And so, do you want to be completely you in your us story?
Well, I do.
I do too. Me too.
I think that's a great place to stop, because literally we could talk all day, which is why Paul has been. And
we just hit an hour
many times.
Actually, one closing thing is this: the place that we always have access to, our Team OS, is across from another person in belonging. This is where we can restore the bank for when we don't have somebody across the space. but we always have access to it. And if we do the things that create belonging, and I will say this, the path that we get to that is where we feel, own, and care for somebody. And it is a choice. And they choose also feel, own, and care for us. We're in this constant place of always regenerating, even in conflict. And that's the big thing. Our Team OS. And then from that, we get to write a whole different story at our individual level from a better place. I guess that's where I'd close it.
Yes. Oh, okay. So good. So for those of you who are interested in learning more about the Team OS benefits, connect with Paul. He has a lovely sheet with all of the things on it. That's very helpful. And a really cool Zoom setup to help your brain in belonging digitally. It doesn't work on all the platforms, but it does work on Zoom. So if you use Zoom a lot, Paul, connect with Paul. He'll hook you up. Thank you so much to Andrew, Sam, and Mark for being in the conversation today. Wonderful questions, wonderful revelations. Thank you so much for sharing parts of your story with us. Paul, always a pleasure, my friend. And until next time, everybody, permission to view.